Angie Vishyanan, and I am the founder of Leg Up Legal. We provide a mentoring program that connects pre-law students to lawyers for mentoring to learn more about the legal profession before they decide whether law school is right for them. And we started doing these Zoom meetups at the beginning of COVID-19 to allow everybody in our community to connect with each other and start to meet other pre-law students, current law students, and lawyers and network with each other and learn a little bit more about the profession. So I've been bringing in guest speakers every week to come chat with you guys about lots of different topics, from different practice areas all the way to law school admissions to other aspects of the profession that you might not understand how they impact you, but I promise you they do. So today I'm excited to introduce Babette Schwartz, and she is a 3L, and she is going to talk to you today about her interest in corporate law and her experiences as a law student and how she's found ways to find work experience in corporate law. So Babette, I'll let you take it away.
All right. Thanks, Angie. I really appreciate that introduction. Hi, everyone. So I'm a 3L at Hofstra Law, and currently I'm interning at the Securities and Exchange Commission. Prior to law school, I actually worked in fashion, like buying, wholesale, manufacturing. So this is very opposite of law, obviously. In undergrad, my interest was always in finance and accounting. That's what I studied. And when I moved to New York, I fell into fashion. So when I had some personal things in my life happen, I decided after 5 years in my previous job, I hit the reset button and applied to law school. And
tell me what kind of sparked your interest in law in the first place?
So, as I mentioned, I was previously working in fashion, and I always thought about law school. My sister is an attorney, and I was always like, and so I thought about it, but it was kind of like making that jump and kind of resetting, especially after working for 5 years. Mm-hmm. But I really wanted to switch to another industry, and so I decided that I either had to, and I had to go back to school to make that jump. So it was either MBA or law school. And I decided law school was for me because one of the things I was really interested in learning was the skills you acquire in law school, and such as writing, for instance, and just like thinking differently, I guess, as my sister described it to me. And I didn't really know what she meant at the time. But now I do know.
What kind of law does your sister practice?
She was doing like corporate type of work, and now she's actually a lobbyist. So she's not practicing law, but she wouldn't have gotten her degree. She wouldn't have gotten her current job without her law degree. And so I like the fact that law school it's an intellectual pursuit, but it's also a trade school where even if someone doesn't want to hire you, you have that degree, you can hang a shingle and you can take it upon yourself to make it rain, essentially.
So at the time that you applied to law school, did you know which areas of law you were interested in?
Yeah, so I wanted to do finance and tax. Like that's like what I was laser focused on. So I only knew what that meant in a broad sense. I honestly didn't really understand the differences between transactional work and litigation. And I didn't, I didn't know. And so I kind of learned, as I learned along the way, I learned what those things were. I haven't actually had an internship in transactional work, but so it's all been litigation so far.
Yeah. So how did you choose the law school that you applied to?
So there were like a few things that I considered. Obviously, like most people, I wanted to get into the best school that I could get into. So when I was applying, the main things I took into consideration were course offerings, clinics, location, scholarship, and unfortunately rankings. And to be honest, after I submitted my applications, I was worried. I was actually worried I wouldn't even get in anywhere. Even though like my LSAT score was like solid, I was just, imposter syndrome, all those things, self-doubt. And so I got offers with scholarships, and I got into my top choice school actually, but they did not offer me a scholarship. And so then I had to kind of make that decision. In regards to debt. And I spoke to a lot of people and I got a lot of opinions, and ultimately I chose less debt because I do think our opportunities are what we make of them. And I knew wherever I was going to go, I was going to make the most of every opportunity that I had. Mm-hmm. And so Hofstra has a lot of clinics. They have a federal tax clinic, which I was like, okay, that's something I really want to do. They also have a lot of course offerings in business, securities. They have like M&A, they have cryptocurrency regulation, and they had a lot of like tax specific classes. So that was like very appealing to me. So that's why I ultimately chose that, and like proximity to Manhattan. So in terms of like alumni, I thought was good as well.
Perfect. So when you arrived, your first year and you think you're interested in finance and tax, those aren't two classes that you get to take in your first year. So after going through your first year classes, did you still have an interest in finance and tax, or did that open up your mind a little more?
So I still had an interest in finance and tax, although I really loved crim law. Like I liked that a lot. And I was like, oh, well, I guess maybe I could do like securities regulation or defense. But really my interests were in tax and finance and like corporate. And I wanted to get that experience and see what that meant. And so I, for my 1L summer, I knew I wanted to work for a judge. Like I knew I wanted that experience because after law school, I don't know if it's most, but probably most people don't end up ever working for a judge. So I figured, okay, law school is my opportunity to get that experience. And I wanted to get work for a judge that is getting a lot of cases that have to do with like commercial litigation. And so I did not end up doing, I didn't go like the normal OCI route, and I didn't even apply in any systems. And I actually applied late to jobs. I didn't start applying until February of my 1L year.
And why? Did you not know that you needed to be applying? Were you just burned out? Like, I think that this happens to a lot of people. So that's why I ask.
Yeah, no, a lot of it was self-doubt, and it's just like fear of like the rejection, I guess you could say. And you hear like everyone, you hear about these people getting jobs at these big law firms, and it's like and it's like so hard to get over it. And I still like have a hard time with it sometimes, but only 10% of your law class is in the top 10%. 90% of law students are not in the top 10%. And like your ranking is not necessarily what like the value that you add, and it doesn't necessarily reflect all of your talents.
When you're in your first year or two, when you're a 1L, after your first semester, you don't get grades back until like the second week of your spring semester. So you don't even have anything to compare yourself to. So I think that is, at that point in your own mind, and you kind of have to get through that and realize that, you got to go ahead and start applying to things even before you have your grades back. And that was always something that was shocking to me when I was in law school, is that I didn't realize how early all of these things happen. You get into law school in August or September, and then you're just figuring out how to learn how to law school that whole time. And then all of a sudden people are like, oh yeah, I've already gotten my summer job. And you're like, wait, what? When did you have time to do that? Like I was busy law school, and I think people don't realize that, in December, a lot of those applications for summer internships start opening up already. So you should have start to have a good idea of what kind of internships you want to apply to, what kind of practice areas you're interested in, right? So so when you applied in February, and you said you weren't applying through all the normal areas like the job boards and stuff like that. So how were you finding jobs at that point?
Yeah, so I did apply to some of them. I actually applied to the SEC. I did not get a call back for that summer, but like I mentioned, I did want to I knew I wanted to get like a judicial clerking experience, and I figured, okay, 2L is typically when you get hired. If whatever job you have that summer, maybe they'll hire you. So 1L, I was like, that's my chance, get that judicial experience. I picked up the phone and I called chambers. I must have called every single chambers in New York City. And the law clerk answered, and I just asked, are you looking for an intern? And the ones that said, yes, email me your information. I emailed those immediately. And then I had a stack, like a whole list of judges who wanted hard copies. So I was like, okay, there was a lot. And I was like, okay, I can't mail all of these out and I'm not spending hundreds of dollars on postage. So I was like, I will drive to the courthouses and hand deliver each of these to judges' chambers.
Oh my goodness.
I didn't end up having to go to the courthouse to submit because literally within 2 weeks, I had 4 interviews and 3 offers
Amazing.
from 2 New York Supreme Court judges and 1 federal court judge. And I was like, okay, my job search is done. So like I literally picked up the phone and I just dialed. So, which I know is kind of crazy, but but that's how I got my 1L summer job.
Yeah. So which judge did you end up going with?
I ended up going with a New York Supreme Court judge, and I know you're supposed to like go for the most prestigious court, and but we connected really well when I interviewed with her, and her clerk seemed really great, and she said that I would be doing the exact same job her clerk was doing, and that was appealing to me. And she said that I'll be able to draft decisions and get a writing sample, and we just connected really well. Excuse me. So I ended up going with her, and it was definitely like the best decision.
And what kind of cases did you see in her court?
So she focused on like all her cases were pretty much commercial law and like commercial litigation, which was really perfect because that's the area I'm interested in. And so like, for instance, like it was my second day, and they gave me like a stack of motions to look through. I had to read them, and it was like the first one I picked up. So, and I was reading it, and it was supposed to be a simple motion for summary judgment. And I'm like going down the checklist, making sure service was processed. And I'm reading the motion, and I ended up going down a rabbit hole on corporate veil piercing. I had no idea what it was. I hadn't taken BizOrgs. I knew nothing. And I gathered my notes, and there was another intern at the time, and he'd already been there for a few months. And I was like, do you know what any of this means? I was like, I have no idea. I was like, here are my notes. He's like, yeah, I'm not really sure. I was like, so I nervously went to the judge. I had my notes and explained my thoughts and had some questions. And she was like, that's amazing you caught that, because they were trying to reverse pierce the corporate veil. And so I was like, okay. And so I ended up doing all this research on it. And now that's actually an area I find really interesting, and I know a lot about now.
Nice. So when you came out of clerking for that judge, did that change any of your interests? Did you decide you were still interested in finance and tax, or was that when you opened up your choices into corporate law?
No, I'm still interested in finance and tax. Like I was like laser focused when I started law school on finance and tax. Like I wanted, like I think I mentioned before, one of the things I really wanted was to learn going into law school was to gain writing skills and come out a great writer. So she really like helped me take my writing from 0 to hero. She didn't like at the time, I didn't know what passive and active voice really were. I was like, I keep saying this, I don't know what it means. I finally figured it out though in that internship. So like by the end of it, I was editing law department drafts before she would even read them. So to make sure I was in active voice and all of those things. But my focus was still on like securities and tax and like corporate law, or still where my interests
Yeah.
lied.
So then when you went into 2L year, what courses did you take to explore these areas that you were interested in?
So when I went into 2L, I took, there was like, there's still some courses I had to take. Like I had to take con law too. And we have like another required course, but I ended up taking derivatives was an area I was really interested in. So I took derivatives law
Can
and
you explain what derivatives are for people who are
oh yeah. So derivatives is an area of finance, like trading. It has to do with like options trading and like commodities. And I took derivatives in undergrad, but not from a legal perspective. And I'm kind of a self-proclaimed finance junkie, I guess. And so that was also one of the courses actually that made me really interested in Hofstra. I was like, oh wow, they offer derivatives. That's like incredible. So trying to oh, I also took BizOrgs that semester because it's a basic class and it's required for other classes. So I wanted to make sure I took that. And I also continued interning for the same judge. So I I was working at the same time and going to school.
Mhm.
So and then and then I, like I said, I was still interested in corporate and tax. So I wanted to get into my school's tax clinic for the spring. And so I hadn't taken tax yet. And so I went to the tax professor, made an appointment with her, introduced myself, set up a meeting, and was just talking to her about tax for about an hour. And by the end of it, I was like, okay, I was like, I think she likes me. I was like, I think I'll get into the tax clinic after I apply. So I applied to the tax clinic and ended up doing the tax clinic the next semester while taking tax, because usually they want you to take tax before doing the clinic. But I
Sure.
explained to her I have a strong interest in it. I have an accounting degree. And so I was able to get that experience, which was really good as well.
So tell me a little bit about some of the matters that you worked on in the tax clinic so that people get a sense of what clinics are like. Because I know I had no idea what a clinic was when I went to law
Yeah.
school. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, definitely. So in the clinic, our adverse, it's like, so a clinic is basically, it's like a law firm. It's a student-run law firm, managed, and then over overseeing it is you have professors, and our adversary in the tax clinic was the IRS. And so we would help low income individuals with their tax issues. And
So was it all personal tax or was it any business
it
tax?
was all personal income tax issues
Okay.
because again so no actually there was a case that it did have to do with someone. She was a sole proprietorship and she did have a tax issue related to her business, and it had to do with like employee tax things because she had um, 1099 people working for her. So like independent contractors would work for her, but she was a sole proprietor.
Mhm.
So I did have to do some research on like business tax and things like that. And actually one of the interesting things is that, so one of the adjunct professors at my school that I was taking a class in, I was taking federal tax procedure, and the person who taught the class, she just taught the one class, and she is the director for the IRS in Long Island. And she was actually she was my adversary on one of the cases I was working on,
Oh
which is kind
my
of funny. It's like, oh, you're my professor, but you're also my adversary on this case.
goodness.
There was no conflict or anything, and
Yeah.
we never talked about it. So, but it was kind of cool, I guess, experience to do that. And it's also like great because you're helping. Like we definitely help people, and like immensely, where we were able to help them get their refunds or reduce their tax liability that in ways that were like life-changing for them.
That's awesome. And okay, so what other experiences did you have during law school? What were you doing during your 2L to 3L summer?
Yeah. So, oh, I will actually preface and also mention though, um, for my classes, like for the class choices that I pick, I always try and take the classes that are taught by adjunct professors who are practicing law during the day and they're just teaching the one class. And I take them because, well, it's usually because while I am obviously interested in the subject, it's a good opportunity to connect with someone that's actually in the world and who's actually practicing, because then you don't know, something could come out of it. One of the professors I actually became very close with, and I still keep in contact with him. And I was supposed to do research for him over this winter break, actually, to help him write his book. And I'm not able to do it because I'm currently working at the SEC and I'm not able to, but like opportunities like come out of those relationships that you're building, even though it's also your professor, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So,
keeping up your relationships with your professors is super important because you never know. You might need them for a reference letter. They might be able to introduce you to practitioners who have jobs, all sorts of things. So definitely keep in touch with your professors. So back to your 2L summer. What did you end up doing for 2L summer?
Oh yeah. So I ended up working at the SEC for my second summer. Like I said, the first time I applied, I didn't hear back and it was a rejection. But I applied to the SEC again. I was like, I'm gonna try again. And I applied to a lot of other places and I only got one call back. And it was from the SEC, which is like one of my dream jobs. And I had one interview and I got the offer. So
you said that was through a callback. So all of the positions that you applied to were through on-campus interviewing. Is that right?
No, I did no on-campus interviewing.
Okay.
I think I applied to a couple, but no one got back to me.
Okay.
So,
what is OCI like at your school? Because OCI is different across different schools. So tell me a little bit about that process.
So at my school, OCI, they have all the postings online. You submit your resume and then you can apply to all the job postings, and then the firms, they'll read your resume and then they'll call you back if they're interested in you.
Do you remember about how many opportunities there were posted?
There were a lot. There were like hundreds,
yeah.
I'd say. But I was really like, I didn't apply to hundreds though. I only applied to the areas that I'm interested in. And so I really wanted to make sure that whatever I ended up doing was in my area of interest, essentially. So, and so I never interviewed. I've never actually had an interview through OCI. So I'm not really sure what happens after applying, to be honest.
Right. And that's actually more common than people think. So OCI is very different depending on what kind of school that you go to. Some schools will have literally hundreds of job opportunities available through OCI. Some schools will have like 30. So just to let you know, it might vary a lot depending on the law school you go to. But on-campus interviewing is a big way that a lot of people try to find their jobs, but it should not be the only thing that you're relying on. You should definitely be doing your own research, reaching out to firms on your own, reaching out to employers on your own, because there's so many more opportunities out there that schools typically don't advertise. So just know that going into the game. When I was in law school, I wish somebody would have told me that a lot earlier, because I thought you should just rely on your law school to give you these opportunities. But my law school didn't have that many opportunities, especially for first-year students. So first-year opportunities are way more rare than like 2L opportunities, because you don't know very much yet. So they don't want to hire you yet. Just know that the 1L jobs for your first summer between 1L and 2L year are much more rare. And so you'll have to do a lot more heavy lifting on your own to find them. And then OCI is also typically only open to the second year students. There's very few schools that I've heard of that open it up to first year students too. So just a little bit more background for everybody who is unfamiliar with this world. But okay, so you went to go work for the SEC. What type of work did you do for the SEC?
So I ended up, it's actually kind of funny. So they tell you when you're applying, they say, what areas are you interested in working in? And at the time I looked it up, but I didn't really understand what each division really meant. And I put enforcement as my number one, just because I read online, okay, that's the cool place to be, I guess. And so I ended up in enforcement, which was really great and really lucky because I really loved it. And from day one, they just kind of threw us into it. At least my group, the lawyers I worked under did, which I was really grateful for, because I kind of thrive in that type of environment when I'm just thrown into things. And I worked on insider trading cases. I've worked on where cases with disclosure issues, for sorry, I'm trying to think what else I can say, because none of the cases are actually disposed of. So right. They're still in process. So it's really hard.
But the types of work that you did, and how much were you working? What was the supervision like? That type of
thing. Oh yeah. So I was probably working 70 plus hours a week. It was not required.
Jesus.
Okay, so I will say it was not required to do that. I am a crazy person, and so I really loved it. I love doing this. This is law school. This area is where I found my passion. It's where I found myself, and so it's just really what I wanted to do in my spare time, basically. And also with COVID, Corona, and it was just okay, well, what else am I going to do? So, but other people, they were in at 8, 9 o'clock. They clocked out at 5 o'clock, and that was fine as well. So I could have done that. But I did doc review. I wrote a lot of memos. I did a lot of research memos. Doc review, for instance, you hear about doc review a lot. I don't know if anyone else has. I didn't really know what that meant at first, but I definitely found out what it meant. And so doc review is when you're going through literally thousands of documents the other party produces, and you have to parse through all of it and figure out how it fits into the story. What else? I helped with interviews and witness testimony, preparation and research for that. What else? So I really had a really broad experience, and it was a lot of substantive work. It wasn't busy work or anything like that.
How many lawyers were you working with?
I'm sorry?
How many lawyers were you working with?
In my group, there was 8 lawyers.
And did you report all of them, or did you have a direct report?
I did have a direct report, and there were some attorneys that I worked with more than others. So it really just depended on the type of case. And there was one case I worked on, and it took up a lot more time. It was a much larger case than some of the other cases. And so it just required more time and attention.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and then were you trying to build relationships with the attorneys at SEC? Were you thinking about going there after law school, or did you know for sure you didn't want to be there after law school? What was going through your mind?
Okay, yeah. So I definitely made relationships with people who worked at the SEC. So at the SEC for the internship program, they every week, like regularly, like throughout the semester, throughout the summer, they have like they would have like Zoom meetings basically. It would be with like commissioners or other attorneys in other groups, and they would give advice or just be on different topics, and we'd be able to ask questions. So after those meetings, and there would be like a lot of other people, so you wouldn't really necessarily get to engage. So because there's like, maybe 50 other interns from across the country in the meeting. And so after those, sessions, I would reach out and email the person and say thank you. And I would speak to something that they spoke about and ask them if they would be willing to talk to me like one-on-one at some point. So that was like really like successful. And it seems like, especially now, since we're remote, a lot of people are remote, people have more time. And I think people are more willing to talk to you because all they have to do is turn on the camera and like, they don't have to go anywhere. Like, that's it. So I definitely like made sure to try and make as many connections as possible. And it definitely helped open a lot of doors at the SEC. And I love it there. And like here, I should say, because I'm still at the SEC, and I would like work here after law school. From my understanding, they don't really hire law students, people straight out of law school anymore. I've spoken to a lot of people. They used to hire straight out of law school. And some of the people that were hired straight out of law school, they've been there for like 10, 15, 20 years now. So I'm like, it seems like it was a successful program.
Yeah.
But
federal government, a lot of people are lawyers, so.
Yeah, but I am trying to be the unicorn, so I can stay. So we'll see what happens. So I will mention, so this happened recently, and this was because I reached out and I was persistent in reaching out, and Angie knows about this. So one of the commissioners that I spoke with, after a chat with, it was me and two or three other interns, because I was able to win this contest they did, and the prize was to have a small group chat with a commissioner. So after that chat, I asked her for another chat, and then I emailed her since then and had a few other chats with her, just one-on-one. And now I'm going to go starting next week, actually, I'm going to be interning for her directly. So like had I not reached out and had I not asked and been persistent in contacting her and trying to build that relationship, that opportunity would not have come up. So
that's part of the thing that I wanted to talk about today, was because I think a lot of students are just curious, how do you make opportunities for yourself? How do you get out there and really find the right people to talk to who can give you these opportunities? And I think, exactly what you said is really important. You find out who the decision makers are, who are the people who are in positions to open up opportunities for you, and you build relationships with them. And that might mean reaching out to them again and again, even if they ignore you the first time. That might mean reaching out anyway. And I know it's really, really scary. I know a lot of law students that I talk to, I asked them like, okay, well, did you reach out to them? They said, yeah, and they ignored me. And I said, okay, well, did you reach out again? And they say, no, I felt like they were too busy. They didn't want to talk to me. And I said, well, why don't you just try one more time? And then they reach out and they're like, oh my goodness, I actually got a call with them. And I'm like, yeah, sometimes practitioners and lawyers, we're just busy. And it doesn't mean that we want to ignore people. It just means that we've got a gazillion things going on. So don't be afraid to reach out more than once. Don't be knocking on their door every day, but yeah, send them an email. And then if you don't hear back, after a week or so, send another follow-up and say, hey, maybe this fell to the bottom of your inbox, but I was, wondering if I could get a little bit of time with you. And then keep trying to find reasons to extend that conversation, and keep trying to find ways to follow up with them and work in natural follow-ups to your conversations. So, and what I mean by that is you can ask them for advice. If you ask them for advice about something and it involves you having to go take some action. So, are there organizations that I can join to learn more about this practice area? Or are there other practitioners that I should talk to that you would recommend me reach out to about this to learn more about this practice area? And then you take their advice and then you follow up with them and you say, hey, I went and did whatever you told me to, and this is the results. And that's not really bothering them to tell them, I need something, but it is keeping them up to date on what are you doing towards your goals. And then that way it keeps you top of mind, right? So, so what are some of the things that you use to keep following up with your supervisor or the woman you're going to be interning with, Babette?
So like one of the questions I remember asking, I asked her, like, what are areas that you see that are emerging areas that would be good to know about or focus on or things like that. And I remember she said the transition from LIBOR to SOFR, which is bank offering rates. And I was like, okay. I was like, and so I went and I did a whole bunch of research, and then I reached back out to her and I said, thank you so much for that recommendation. I'm reading a lot about it now. And I just, told her about that. I don't even think she responded back to that email. And then like, I don't know, like a month and a half later, I reached out again and just told her what was happening, found another excuse to, just say hi. And so I just kind of like kept doing that. And that's what I'll usually do with just about anybody, just like try and find reasons to reach out and like be specific in my questions, like ask an opinion on current happenings and like hot topics that are in their practice area, like that you're genuinely interested in. Like, don't just to ask, because it's always, you can kind of always tell if someone's interested in something, I feel, and based on like enthusiasm. I found like you're gonna have the same conversations with people with like over and over again with different people. But like, it's okay, because you're just going to end up fostering each relationship into something that's like unique and personal as you get to know someone, if that makes sense. And so it's like also like kind of good interview practice too.
Yeah, because you get better at telling your own story. The more that you talk to these people, you're going to find yourself regurgitating the same details about yourself over and over, but you're refining your story so that when you get yourself into an interview situation, it's not the first time you're ever spitting those words out of your mouth. So, so it's really helpful, because when you're talking to all of these people, just very casually, like you're reaching out to people for informational interviews. You're not trying to get like a job interview. I would reach out to practitioners and just ask for informational interviews to learn more about what they do and what their life is like and what their career path was like. And as you're talking to them and you tell them parts of your story, you'll pick up on what do they think is interesting. And eventually you'll realize like, oh, these are the things that people like about my experiences. And you can use those to highlight those in your interviews. So it's good practice, really, to be doing these informational interviews, even though you think, oh, a job's never going to come out of it. You would be amazed. I've had so many students who learned how to do informational interviews, and they come back to me and they're like, Andrew, that person offered me a job. I'm like, yes, I know. It happens all the time, So I know, it can be really intimidating to reach out to practitioners. I saw in the chat box, somebody said that students may be scared to reach out because OCI advisors tell you not to. So our OCI advisors did tell us, don't reach out to the people that are interviewing, like that are listed in the database that are interviewing, but they didn't tell us not to reach out to other people at the firm. So I just took that to mean I'm going to reach out to all the other people at the firm, because you want to get to know what the firm or that legal employer's culture is like, right? So reach out to other associates in the firm. Usually the person who's doing on-campus interviewing is going to be a partner or somebody who has like some sort of hiring decision-making, power. But you could be reaching out to associates at that firm who are lower level attorneys, that you could just be finding out, what their life is like, because your life will probably be like that for the first few years that you're working there. So you want to get a sense of, what does the firm believe in? What's important to them? What are their values? What are some of the types of work that you would be given as a junior level associate? So ask those kinds of questions. What type of work were you given when you were an intern, or what types of work were you given when you were a first year associate, so that you can start to get a sense of what types of things that you might work on, because you'll find that firms and legal employers, are very, very different across the board. And in some internships, like Babette said, you'll get a lot of on hand or hands-on experience, and you'll get to actually draft things, you'll get to do a lot of research. And then other internships are more, kind of just for show. Like, they parade you around the firm and they're like, oh, look, we have an intern. And but you're not doing anything very substantive. And so you want to get a sense of what that internship will really be like. So
yeah, no, I was gonna say I absolutely agree with that. And I was also going to mention, like, about Rita's comment, even, and like, as was mentioned, yeah, don't reach out to the person who's giving, necessarily doing the interviews, but reach out to another partner at the firm. Like, usually these firms have lots of partners. Like, reach out to them, like, go for the top. Like, I mean, what's the worst thing that could happen? No, you're in the same position then. But if you ask, like, something could come out of it. So it's like, kind of, I don't know, I like the saying, fortune favors the bold. So
yeah, and it doesn't matter what level that you're at. I mean, one of my students right now is a junior in college, made up an independent study for himself so that he could talk to managing partners at law firms, and literally just reached out to like 50 random managing partners at these mega law firms. And he actually heard from like a good number of them. So I'm like, I mean, if you can get a, face to face with a managing partner, do it, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I reached out to, she's a CEO at a very large trading firm, and she's an attorney, and she actually got back to me, and we ended up talking for an hour and like having a really great connection. And I still follow up with her, and I don't hear back from her in emails a lot of times, but I still send her emails.
So what do you do to keep track of all the people that you're talking to?
So I use a spreadsheet, and so I'll have like notes and of when I've contacted that person last and when I should contact that person next. And then for each person I talk to, I have a folder and I have a Word document for each person, just like with their name on it, with like bullet points of what we talk about. Because I make sure to, Angie actually taught me this, to take copious amounts of notes. And because you're not going to remember everything that's said when you talk to someone, it's really hard to remember. And
more than one person in the same day, because then all of a sudden they all blur together and you're like, I don't remember anything I just talked about.
Yeah, so that's like how I keep track. And so then I basically have like a Word document for each person, and so I'll do that. So that's how I keep track.
Going into law school, think back to, what did you know about all the areas that you think you're interested in then, and what do you know now about them, that you would want to share with your former self?
So things I would say, other than, so there's obviously start networking sooner rather than later. Like, I should have been more, I should have networked more in my 1L year. I didn't do that. So that's kind of a regret and a lost opportunity, because I think that, well, someone told me, someone I was speaking with and who's become a mentor, said, take advantage of being in law school and being a student, because people are more willing to talk to you as you are a student. You're going to have less people respond to you once you're not a student, because now you're competition. And
Yep.
maybe that, that might sound bad, but that's just like fact. Like, so as a student, you have like, take advantage of that, because it's going to be harder once you're no longer a student. And if you haven't made any connections, it might be it'll be more difficult.
And you're going to hear a lot of conflicting advice. I mean, I was told
That
when I
too.
got to law school, and I was lucky enough to have a mentor before I got to law school who told me you need to be networking from day one. But there were people at my law school, faculty members, who told me, no, you don't need to waste your time with going out there to talk to attorneys right now. All you should be focusing on is your grades. If you get good grades, all will be fine. And I'm like, okay, well, that's crap advice, because not
Yep.
everyone's going to get good grades, and even if you do have good grades, you still need the relationships. And relationships are more important in our industry than practically anything else. People want to work with people they like. And you could have the best grades in the world, but if they don't like you, they're probably not going to hire you. So you need to get out there and start networking as soon as possible.
Yeah. It's definitely a lot of work, but it's definitely worth it, and like do that. Another thing is, especially in figuring out what you're interested in, I really, I highly recommend doing a judicial internship if you can get it in a court with a judge that is going to give you substantive work. I've heard about people having internships with judges and all they do is observe. Like they don't actually do any of like the law clerk stuff. And I was like, really? I was like, I didn't even know that. I didn't know that. And so when you're interviewing with a judge, like, or with anybody, ask them, you're interviewing them also. So you don't want to end up in an experience where they're not giving you anything and you're not really learning anything. And for me in my 1L year and fall 2L, I, working for a judge, you're able to see a lot of different types of cases. You're able to basically learn what not to do, because a lot of attorneys, they make a lot of mistakes. So it's okay to make mistakes, own your mistakes. And if you make a mistake, come with a solution for that mistake. Um, I think another thing is that I wish I did my 1L summer was boot camps. And that's something I did my 2L summer. I did 2 M&A boot camps because, like I said,
What were the boot camps like?
So I did 2 M&A boot camps. One was a simulation. So I had a coach who was a senior M&A partner, and I had someone, another student was my partner, and we literally ended up negotiating and drafting an M&A deal based on a fact pattern, and then we negotiated against other teams. The program is called Law Meets. I'll put it in the chat, and it's Professor Akamoto, I think it's spelled, runs it.
Your school or?
So it was not like it was advertised through my school, but it was not it wasn't held by my school. It's like people all over the country. There was like 60 teams or something. It was a really good experience. So I would recommend doing that. I think it's only offered over the summer. And so I recommend doing boot camps because it gives you an opportunity to like learn more about practice areas.
And what was the other boot camp that you did?
So Emily asked if it was like moot court or mock trial. I guess kind of, because there is someone who's judging your like negotiating against another team, and every other week we would have a new fact pattern, and we'd have to work in the clauses into our contract and do redlining and then send it to the other team who put their comments in. And so did
you get school credit for it?
No, I did not get it. So I got no school credit for it. It was literally in my own time. But I will say that in a recent interview, the interview I actually had with lead counsel of the commissioner I'm going to be interning for, he asked me about the boot camps. The other one I did just side note, was through Hogan Lovells. I got a CLE credit for it. And it was like 5 weeks, and it was more like a classroom type of experience. And then you take a test. But I will say that the attorney I interviewed with liked that he asked me about the boot camps. It was something interesting to talk about. And he was like, did you get credit for that? Or was it through school, or was it mandatory? I said, no, I just did it on my own time. And he was like, really? And I was like, yeah. He's like, you did it while you were working also over the summer? I was like, yeah. He's like, do you sleep? I said, I'll sleep. I said, I'll sleep when I'm dead. And so I think doing things like that really displays like you have a strong interest, like you're doing things outside of your required schoolwork.
Yeah, there's also if people are interested in those types of boot camps, there's Legal, which offers online courses. So they have like an M&A course, they have a couple of other corporate transactional courses as well. And right now it's free for all law students. So reach out to Hotshot and you can do those. There's also, the company used to be called Inside Sherpa, but now it's called The Forge.
Oh yeah.
And they have, let's see, I think it's The Forge now. But Latham Watkins, one of the like largest Magic Circle firms, offers a virtual experience in transactional law, corporate law, through Inside Sherpa. And White and Case does as well. That's true. So if you're interested in those types of experiences, I don't even think you have to be a law student. I've heard of pre-law students signing up.
I'm on the White and Case one, and I'm not a law student yet. And they're like having you draft documents and stuff. It's really cool.
Oh yeah, that's great. Yeah, no, like if you're not working, even if you are working, like go on the Forage, which was Inside Sherpa, which I'm familiar with also, and like do those. You can put them on your resume. Like they'll ask you about it in an interview, and they'll see like, oh wow, this person really has a interest in this area.
You can put it on your resume as a certificate program or something like that, or extracurricular activity, or things like that. That's totally fine. So I know we're kind of at the end here, so I want to open it up. If students have questions that you want to ask, feel free to just jump on camera or ask in the chat box, and we'll
and I can stay a little longer if anyone wants to ask about like any boot camps or experiences like that. So
anybody have any questions for Babette? Come on, don't be shy.
My only question was the one about if you're looking at a specific organization from the outside, like what sorts of things are entry-level attorneys versus like promotional opportunities? Like in the state court system in New York, you said you didn't go through the job sites, but they have like, there's one section for like office and legal, and they have like a coding system for open and promotional opportunities. But like at a White and Case or like a private law firm or a governmental entity, if they don't have that like specific like FS rankings, how do you know which ones you can just like break into versus which ones are like, you have to have been a litigation attorney to do appeals work, or you have to do, something as like a X number of years experience kind of situation?
Well, unfortunately, that stuff isn't always easy to find. I mean, usually the large law firms will post any junior associate positions they have available so you can see, but it changes every year. It just depends on the ebb and flow and the needs of the firm. But you can always call. So just call somebody in HR and just be like, hey, what is your summer associate program like if you have one at your firm? And which practice areas do people get to, typically try out? Some firms have like a set rotation, so they'll allow you to rotate through all practice areas that they have. Some of them will only allow you to rotate through, 2 or 3. Some firms will only allow you to apply for a specific one, and then you have to just do that one the whole summer. So I think it's just really different from firm to firm, and you just have to really just call somebody and ask. Usually if you're applying to something through OCI, they will tell you which department you're applying for, or who the contact is for that. And it'll have more details about what type of position it is. But yeah, I mean, sometimes it's just picking up the phone and calling somebody in HR to find out.
Yeah.
I mean, things that I would say that I've heard of as positions that are really, really hard to get out of law school. And it doesn't mean that it's impossible, because there's always an exception to the rule. And like one of my friends works at the AG's office. He was the only person they've ever hired out of law school at the AG's office, Texas AG. And in like a decade. And when he was working there, like Babette was told, they were like, we don't hire people out of law school. And he's like, yeah, but if you made an exception, what would it be? Like, what would I have to have on my resume? What does it need to look like? What sort of skills do I need to have in order for me to be the exception to that rule? And he just kept asking people that, like, over and over and over. And finally they were like, okay, fine, we'll make a position for you. I think there's always an exception to the rule. You might be told, like, we don't hire out of law school. And I've heard this about in-house positions as well. Everybody says like, oh, it's impossible to go in-house out of law school. There's always exceptions to that rule. One of my, one of the 2Ls that was in the class behind me, actually, I coached him for moot court. He ended up going to American Eagle 2 years out of law school. He had only had he was employed by a law firm for 8 months when American Eagle finally called him back from his application from the year before. And they said, you know what? We're going to start hiring entry levels. Do you want to come in? And he was like, yep. And he walked out of his firm and went to go work for American Eagle. So I think, these positions, they might seem rare, but it doesn't mean that they're impossible to get. But it is hard to find out, okay, what types of positions are open right out of law school. Most of the time, you'll just have to pick up the phone and call.
Yeah, I will also mention one thing I remember that had been said to me, and I'm glad I didn't listen to this piece of advice, to be honest. They're like, don't stay at the same place for more than one semester. Get a lot of different experiences. Yes, I agree with getting lots of different experiences, but if you can be at some place for 2 semesters, for instance, over the summer and then goes into the fall, that shows, okay, they kept you on. That's a good thing. That shows okay, this person did such good work in the semester, they kept them for another semester. And so it gives you the opportunity to go deeper into whatever projects and things you're working on as well. And I think that's one of the things that got me my SEC internship, to be honest, because in the interview, he said, you stayed at the judge for 7 months or 8 months. It was did she want you to stay more than the summer? It's yeah, we had a conversation about it, and there was more work things I could do on cases I was working on. So they really liked that, it seemed. So it seemed like that really helped. And I'll also mention that if there's anyone who is a 1L or 2L that's on, I see people left and they just about to miss the info. I can connect you directly with, so one of the attorneys I worked for at the SEC, under the SEC over the summer, he did email me, and he was like, oh, if you know anyone looking for an internship, feel free to connect them with me. So if you want, you can find me on LinkedIn. It's easy. So you can message me on LinkedIn, and if you want, we can have a talk and I can give you a direct introduction, because they actually made him in charge of the internship program now. And it just happens that I worked under him directly. And so yeah.
I think that would be my other key piece of advice, is that people always think that you only get job opportunities through attorneys. That's totally false. Sometimes you get job opportunities from your own classmates. So this happened all the time, where you'd have an upperclassman who was in the class before you, who would intern at some prestigious place that you wanted to be at. I would just reach out to that person and be like, hey, can you put me in touch with the person who is going to be your supervisor, or whatever, and put in a good word for me. And almost always that yielded in at least a meeting with that person, if not you actually getting an offer for that position, because they do trust the people that, you know, were in the position. Like if they liked their work, they're going to be like, yeah, okay, we trust you to find us somebody else who would also be a good fit, you know? So make sure that you connect with the upperclassmen in your classes, and also other classmates that are in positions that you want to be in.
Yeah. So yeah, if anyone's interested in SEC work, again, I'm happy to connect you and do that. Even if you're 3L and you're interested for the spring, I could, you know, it's all like rolling, I guess, hiring. So, you know, I'm happy to like connect you with someone.
Thank you so much, Babette. That's so generous of you. I really appreciate you for spending your time with us today and sharing all these experiences with folks. I mean, I think it really helps people to see how other people figure these things out. Because, you know, I mean, I went into law school so lost, and I would have loved to just have like one person in the class before me who would have told me, you know, what's what. So thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us today.
Yeah, no, of course. No, thanks for having me. I hope it was helpful. I'll also mention I'm not in the top 10 or 20% of my class. So like, you know, that's like my soft spot. But like my ranking is not everything I have to offer. We all have bad days for exams, and you know,
law school exams are very much a lot of luck. I mean, I some exams thinking, wow, I bombed that exam and somehow the curve caught me and I was like B+. No. And then I walked out of some exams like, nailed it, B-. Wait a minute, you know?
Yep. I bombed my con law, actually both my con law exams, and I was actually research assistant for one of the professors. But so that's like one thing I did to kind of offset that, I guess. Like, okay, ignore my bad con law grade. I did do research. I'm competent and capable. So yeah, just kind of like a little extra. So yeah, but
all right. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for coming today. And we actually have one more event this week. So tomorrow is our virtual happy hour. It's our networking event. So you actually get to talk to another person one-on-one. We'll do introductions in the main room for about 15 minutes, and then we'll break everybody out into breakout rooms where you get to talk to somebody for 15 minutes, and then we'll switch everybody around and you'll get another round with somebody new. So, and you can meet pre-law students, current law students, and lawyers on the networking happy hour. So it could be any one of those people. I try to pair up people who are not of the same type. So if you're a pre-law student, I try to pair you with a current law student or a lawyer. So definitely come check it out. It's 4 p.m. Central tomorrow. And if anybody needs the link for that, I can drop the link in the chat box. So, but thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope to see you all tomorrow.